And rolling. And 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Rhea Khattoi, and I'm the founder and CEO of Khattoi.
Thank you so much for coming. I know this was like so last minute. I was like, hey, you want to be part of this? So thank you for being
Of
so
course.
understanding and coming out and helping out and just being yourself.
Yeah,
So,
anytime.
Thank you. And you came in all the way from LA to do New York Fashion Week, and so what a great way to segue right into what you do for a living. So how did you get into creating clothing and like being this founder and CEO?
Yeah, so my background is actually in fashion. I went to college for design and merchandising at Drexel University, and then I worked first as a buyer, transitioned into brand marketing, worked like the corporate side of it, worked at Target and JD Sports. And then I was kind of in a bit of a career lull. I was going to go back from brand marketing into buying when, as I was interviewing, I saw that there was a white space opportunity in the market. I personally found it really difficult to shop for sustainable South Asian clothing, and just it was weird. You'd go to some random auntie's house, you didn't really know what was going on, and then I decided to just interview other people to see if anyone felt the same. So we interviewed 50 girls, age ranges 18 to 35, all around the US, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different backgrounds in India. And what I learned was not only was I the only one who felt this way, but it was 10 times worse for people who were getting married. So it was kind of something where it was started as I don't want this to be a continuous trend. I personally even would feel like, oh, this is so annoying, I'd rather just wear Western clothes, and I didn't want the culture to die out or have people who aren't Indian be able to not wear Indian clothing or feel comfortable in the clothing. So that's how we started.
So what is like a sustainable Indian clothing brand? What does that mean?
So for us, it's a few things. Our long-term vision is to be 100% sustainable, from zero wastage emissions to using natural fabrics like 100%. Right now for us, it starts with ethical production, which is the base of it, and then minimizing fabric wastage however we can. So there's actually an evolution that you can also see with us with each collection, with each business decision that we've made as we get closer and closer to that full sustainable business model.
I'm in awe like of how you even created this. Like, did you have any help in the beginning? Like, how? I know you mentioned that you interviewed girls, but like, how did you get started? Like, from the ground up?
I think a huge part of it was the fact that my background is in it. So I knew how to create a collection. And I also I was very clear in the fact that on who our target customer was. And for us, our target customer was almost like your Zara shopper, but someone who wanted to shop sustainable, probably couldn't afford it and wanted that South Asian infusion with it. So from the traditional wear to the Indo-Western wear that we had, that was the person that we targeted, created the collection with that in mind. And then our supply chain was actually a whole other thing. When I decided to start the company, I let go of multiple job offers because I wanted to go to India and learn, because I knew the business side of things. I didn't know the Indian fabric side of things. Booked my tickets, and COVID round 2 hit India. So obviously couldn't go. I was freelancing at the time also, and I came to New York, I would say, in August of 2021, and was like, this isn't working. It was like hitting my head against pavement. Like, our supplier that we had, it was nothing, and I was ready to give up. What ended up happening was I flew back to Dallas, and before I started the company, the interviews I was doing, I also did research on fabrics and sustainability to educate myself. And one of the girls I spoke to, she ended up messaging me as soon as I landed and said, hey, I know you already have your first vendor for your first collection, but I loved our conversation about sustainability and bringing Indian craft to the Western world. I would love to work with you for your second collection. So I gave her a call. I was like, so I don't have anyone to do this. Are you interested? This is when I want to launch. I have everything done. You just got to find the fabrics. Here are my price points. She took like a day and was like, cool, I can do it. And then we accidentally created our own individual production house through that. So I actually ended up not going to India for, I would say, almost a year and a half until after we started the company. I went finally this May, so a while later, but I believe everything very much happens for a reason. This time when I went back, I knew a lot more knowledge. I knew what I was looking for, and I think I was probably much more intentional than what that initial trip would have been.
Mm-hmm. So what does research in India look like for you? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so multi-different levels. For me, it starts with really going into how fabrics are even made. So looking at the different fabrics, looking at the different crafts, and looking at sustainability. So sustainability in India is created a lot through hand-woven materials, but it also goes into what that supply chain looks like. That's not a great working environment, which is actually something that I saw this past time when I was there, and I'm still digesting that workflow and that people are okay with that. That's one angle of it. The second angle of it is just seeing the workspaces that anybody works in, but also learning about the different embroidery. Something really unique about India that people don't think about is each region has its own style, from embroidery to hand looms. And living here, we already struggle with two identities. We don't know about most of India. So I think long-term vision is to be able to also be a storefront that is able to educate people on that, and work with different brands. It's not just our personal brand, but work with different brands that are highlighting those same values.
Like, if you could tell the entire world something about sustainable fashion, what would it be?
Ethical production. Ethical production is such a big thing. And this is coming from someone who used to be the $10 shopper. Like, I wanted to buy every single item for $10. I found it before and have built my closet a lot on that. But when you really look into it, that's not sustainable, because then if you're paying $10 for a garment, the people who made it get paid literally nothing. This has kind of been an up and up for me since college, but once I started the company, I really started looking at then, okay, in order for an item to be X amount, like, this is the amount of labor that went behind it. And what was the most shocking is the answers I would get from people, where I would know someone working like full 6-figure job, living their best life, $100 bar in New York every other weekend, but wouldn't pay $100 for a hand-woven material that someone has spent so much time working on. But they will go and argue for themselves to get a raise. Rambled a little bit, but I think main point is, for me, it's like, if you can go and argue for yourself to go and get a raise, you can pay $100 for something that is just bare minimum ethically made.
Fair point. I think that's very valid. You mentioned that the people that you work with here are all women. So, like, what does that mean for you, and like, why did you choose that direction?
Yeah, I think honestly it was more of something that just happened. I wouldn't necessarily say we went out with that specific vision. One thing I will say is that I have not actually seen any guys want to be interested in this industry, or to work with that. I think you generally just see women, which kind of sucks because it's not just a women's industry, but our team was very much built on being able to help people, all women led, to really let people learn. My biggest thing is I want everyone to be able to grow and learn and challenge themselves. And then within India itself, so our team also in India used to be all women, but we recently graduated to a bigger facility. But again, being very intentional, so the people who make our clothes are now deaf and mute, because I want to be able to give back to the disabled community as well.
How did you just become more, like, I guess, fine-tuned with time, or did you have all of this kind of in place in the beginning? Like,
yeah,
what was your process with that?
Definitely a lot of learning. The one thing I will pride myself on is I think every single collection, bridal order we have, whatever it is, it's constant, like, how can you improve, how can you learn, and almost like immediate implementation. I think we have to be very agile and okay with knowing that you don't know everything, and it's just about like the learning and being able to improve as you learn. So I've always taken, I think, every curve with a grain of salt, because I think it teaches us something more. So that's kind of been, we have our end goal, like I said, but along the way it's been different things that even I couldn't have imagined to get us to that end goal.
Yeah. So how do your parents feel about everything that you're doing? Like, how did you have to tell them, like, hey, I'm going to be doing this now? And what was that transition like for you out of your typical, I guess, quote unquote job?
So my parents are very supportive, but I will definitely say there's a little bit of that typical South Asian parent behind it. While it is very, very supportive, it also is make sure that you're able to feed yourself. And I think something that's been really difficult for me is I'm a first-generation entrepreneur. There's no one in our family who's even dabbled in anything like this. So it becomes very scary. Like, as much as my parents are like, go, so do your dreams, like do whatever you want to do. My dad is actually the one who pushed me to go into fashion in the first place in college. It is a little bit of like, this is just such uncharted territory. Including I don't really have anyone to look up to. Like, I am trying to find mentors and reaching out to people, but it's very different than someone who has grown up seeing entrepreneurship from a very close eye.
That mentorship aspect is so crucial. Like, I have always struggled with finding I have like heroes that I look up from afar, but I'm like, I would love to pick your brain and just learn about it.
Yeah. So, I think for me with other entrepreneurs, I feel very safe. And I don't feel different. I feel normalized. Something that I did struggle with is starting a business very young. I was all of a sudden very different. My disposable income went from I had some to I have absolutely none. And I think it's I still deal with it in terms of like, oh my God, am I doing everything wrong? Did I just choose the harder path just to choose the harder path? But when you're surrounded by other entrepreneurs and like-minded people, that's a lot of times when I get reminded that, no, it wasn't just like choosing a hard path to choose a hard path. There was more of an impact or a reason behind it in terms of the overall purpose. And I think when you're going off the cuff and kind of creating your own path, it's really important to have yourself surrounded by those people, because there is no milestones or pathways for you to really look at, especially when you consistently have to change and grow in terms of whatever business comes.
How has your family's history impacted your work today?
I think my family's history inspires me and pushes me to keep going. About 2 generations ago on my dad's side, we were still kind of in a little bit of poverty. My family was not educated. My grandfather actually used to walk 2 days to get to college and just like sleep at people's houses on the way. His brother worked and gave him the money to be able to go to college. And then after that, he took all of his kids and all of his brother's kids, educated them, and now I have the life that I have today. So a huge sense of, because I have the privilege, I need to do something with purpose. And not only take it further, but kind of create those opportunities for others as well.
That puts a lot of pressure on you.
I think it's a mix of, sometimes it's pressure, but more than that, I feel inspired. I think the pressure for me maybe comes a bit more from, while I do sense this, my parents also, on the other hand, want that, but they're also kind of like, we built a privileged, stable life. Like, they don't want to see me leave that privileged, stable life and be short on cash because I'm trying to start a business, or lean into anything that maybe wasn't a typical path for someone whose family has gotten some privilege from there. So I think that puts more pressure, because it feels like I'm trying to step back up to there than being inspired by the family path.
So talk to me about your mental health.
I always laugh at that because I feel like it's a obviously ongoing topic. Personally, my mental health has even been through a lot, even this past week. I've made a lot of business decisions within the past year that I don't think I ever really thought I would, changing the business from one direction to the other, having faith to be able to do that, constantly wondering if I did the right thing by even starting a business at this young age, if I decided to just choose a difficult path. And that's not to say that, anything else isn't difficult, but I think I've been challenged in more ways because I decided to start so young. But it's also something where I feel myself constantly growing. This past week, being at New York Fashion Week, being in person with pop-ups is very mentally taxing. And very mentally taxing because my other side of it is corporate fashion. So I'm seeing a little bit of like what my life would have still been if I wouldn't have left the industry, and constantly being reminded of, did I make the right decision? Am I doing the right thing? And playing with those two while making business switches. And for me, what's also very difficult is because I'm in the same industry, I struggle to be able to have a full-time job and do this because it's technically a conflict of interest. So definitely very challenged, but also puts me in places where then I have to put myself out there and look for things like funding or challenge myself to figure out other ways to feed myself, which I wouldn't have had to do if I didn't decide this. So I think it's constantly growth and reflection. The hardest thing for me as being an entrepreneur is remembering you don't have a manager, so you're responsible for checking in on yourself and allowing yourself to think. I did not realize how much thinking time I need. I like to say being an entrepreneur is either staring at a wall thinking or running around with like you're a headless chicken.
Me today.
Yeah.
I get that. I think you need like space. Like after I finished like the you finished the documentary for the first one, I was like, I'm supposed to make another one?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Like, how am I supposed to muster up the strength? And like now that I know like what we're capable of, it's like you just want to push yourself even more.
Yeah.
And like one-upping yourself is like such a thing that like I just want to do, but like it's hard to even fathom that.
Yeah.
So like talk to me about your mental health when you were younger and like how it transitioned over the years.
You know, I will say I don't really think it was ever like a huge focus of mine when I was younger. When I really think back to it, I think something that was a huge part of mental health that I probably glaze over is we moved from like Minneapolis, Minnesota to Bangalore, India and back. And that was really difficult. And also really difficult because I think I was probably about 12 when I knew I did not want to come back to the US. But I also knew that my mom didn't like it in India because it was like dramatically different lifestyle than what she'd gotten used to here, and made the decision to not say anything. It was also a very interesting transition, and we've also moved a lot. So while it wasn't a topic when I was younger, as I've gotten older, I've realized there's certain things that I'll do that is kind of accredited to that. I'm a very adaptable person, which is a great thing, but sometimes while adapting myself to certain situations, I would forget to make sure I'm bringing out myself too, because I was so used to moving. And I didn't realize that until I was about 25.
So recently?
Yeah, I would say like probably right before 24. I was lucky that I realized it actually right before I moved into a new city. So once I think I got to that city, it was a lot of great connections immediately. And everyone I've met, I think even after 25 or reignited with, after learning this, has been incredible relationships. But it took me a while to realize I was accidentally hiding myself.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, how did you, like, do you feel like you have support now when it comes to talking about this?
Yes and no. I think I'm very lucky to be surrounded by people who've also gone through things that are relatively similar. Just this week, it was great because I got to spend time with not one, but two friends who have a very similar background to me in terms of like, grew up here, went to India, came back. And that bond is very unspoken because we've just gone through a lot of the similar. But also, I think I've been very intentional about when I'm feeling down or something, reaching out to people.
Talk to me a little bit about your challenges when it comes to being that business owner,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna glorify your job all day, every day, because it's something that I don't have, right? Like, I'm sitting here with my 9 to 5, and then I'm working until 11 p.m. on my dreams, working on the weekends, and I'm like, oh, if I could just do this full time, like, maybe then I'll be able to take a break. But when our conversation happened, I was like, oh, there's a whole other side. Grass is not necessarily greener. It's all about perspective. So tell me a little bit about that. I hope I
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I work just as much, if not more, than when I had a 9 to 5 and this, because one, it's like everything is constantly on the line. You have a fear of like, you need to take care of yourself, but it's also like, oh, did I really need to give myself that day off? Like, should I have been doing something else? And you're also financially always a little bit strapped. So it's like, you are like, for example, I am doing this full time, but I'm also trying to freelance and do this and do that and act a little and model a little to get cash in. So you're constantly doing different things. The flexibility and schedule is great, but your mind is still constantly going. I think you feel a little bit more pressure also, whereas like, I think the other day I had a bad day and someone was like, oh, let's just go get a drink, you'll be fine. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, that's not a luxury because I decided to switch and do this full time and give myself a new financial situation. But you don't get that sense of also stability that you have when you have that 9 to 5 of like, I have something to fall back on. And something really difficult for me is, I think I've actually realized I've been looking for a little bit of that. It would be helpful to grow the company, but because I work in the same industry, I get asked, will you quit Khattoi? And I say no, and then they usually come back to me and say, we gave the job to someone who can do this 100% full time. Although I never said I wouldn't do it 100% full time.
Right. How does that go into your relationships?
Friendships, I will say I'm very lucky. I have been surrounded by a lot of people who have come and been like, this is what you were supposed to do. So that is incredible, I think. I am also surrounded by a lot of people who will remind me, even when I am financially feeling strapped, of like, you don't need that right now, it's okay, like, make the risk, you'll make this up. Like, I've had a lot of people kind of look out for me, and just lucky, even when I'm having those days, I can reach out to people, and it's like, it's okay, like, it'll happen, just stay calm, like, you know what you're doing, and kind of talk things out. What I think has been more difficult for me, and I will also say I've made great relationships being an entrepreneur and founder. The rooms it's put me in to meet the right people has been incredible, and I don't think I would have been able to meet these people without having Khattoi with me. From a relationship standpoint, it's been hard. I frequently have gotten told no one wants to date someone who owns their own business. No one wants to bring home a girl who doesn't have a traditional 9 to 5. So I think it's because you're in instability, right? It's not a projected timeline. It's not a crossing things off the list. I think that's a part of it. If I had a 9 to 5 while doing this, I don't know if I would get the same reaction, but even an observation is I can tell you I have a lot of girl and guy friends who are doing something different since I live in LA, like acting, modeling, dancing, whatever it is. And a trend I've seen is most of the guys, not everyone, but most of the guys are in a relationship and most of the girls are single. And everyone is saying like, I want to be with someone. I want to like build a life with someone. Like, it's not that there's a want that's not there. It's just like, yeah. The one thing I will say that is interesting though, is that so my parents have actually been like, no one's telling you to date Indian. You're getting this feedback mostly from like the South Asian community here. Like, this is half of your doing, which is not false. But when I went to India in May, very different response. I think what was also interesting was here, I was going from a wedding here to a wedding in India. The wedding here, I was 25, not necessarily the next one in line, but like close. Questions immediately, why aren't you getting married? Why aren't you dating someone, this, that, whatever? And I was like, I don't know, I'm trying, it's just not happening. And then I went to India and immediate, you're trying to look for someone now? Why would you do that? You're 25. Focus on what you're doing right now. Build something up. You don't need to get married right now. It'll come when it comes. And even when I met others in India, it was like, oh, wow, you're doing something different. I think also maybe it could just have been like the people I was meeting there, but it was let's all do something different, or let's all do something that we feel like we have a purpose in. So it was just an interesting.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You would think it's the opposite. You've mentioned that you have some male entrepreneur friends, right? And you have female entrepreneur friends. Like, how do you think those perspectives are different? And
Actually, interesting that you asked me this question because I haven't thought of it, but there is a pretty stark difference. I think my female entrepreneur friends, I go for emotional support. It's a lot more emotional support and then a gut check on business decisions. But when I'm like actually really struggling with like, should I make this business decision or not? I've gone to my male entrepreneur friends for advice, and it's a strictly business conversation. And emotions really like they're like glassed over, if anything like that. But the female entrepreneurs, I think, are there for you on all different rounds versus male entrepreneurs. It's like kind of a one-track conversation. Through no one's fault, it just naturally happens. But I also think with that, male entrepreneurs are a bit more ready to take a risk. Like one female entrepreneur I'm very close to, we talk frequently about like, am I doing the right thing? Oh, I think we might need to raise money, this, that, like it's a struggle. Versus if I talk to a male entrepreneur, it's like, I already got money, I just went for it. Like I didn't think two things, there's a different almost level of confidence where it's like, what are you talking about? You just go, you just do it. And as women, I think we're going and we're doing it, but we're also almost like stigmatized a little bit more. And I'm experiencing that right now. Like I have a business that's a proven business model. It will always make money and we're going significantly more into weddings. But me getting money to do that versus a guy just being like, I think I have a tech idea, very different. I think, and here's the business model, I won't get the money, he will.
Just based on the idea and because there's like that confidence maybe, or like what do you think that's credited to?
I really don't know 100% of it. I think something else that was also actually really frustrating for me for a while was multiple female entrepreneurs I looked up to were funded either by their fathers or their significant others. And even when I spoke to people who are my mentors about how did, if you weren't working when you did this, how did you do it? Everyone's response was frequently, I was really lucky to have someone else who's bringing in an income, which when I'm not in that situation, I was like, okay, well, what do I do? But it is, I think, a little bit more interesting to see that dynamic. Like you don't really see men saying that. I've also seen, I think I've had a few male entrepreneur friends who, when I ask them, how did you keep going? What did you do? It's because they go with it a little bit more detached from emotion in terms of one of my friends, when I asked him, how are you confident when you made a switch from business A decision to business B? And his response was, it's because I have taken money from friends and family for A and I knew I could do it. Or I needed to give back to them. Versus if you talk to more females, they'll say, well, I built A out first and now I'm asking for funding for B, not the vice versa.
The approach is just entirely different.
Yeah.
So it's hard to compare.
It's very hard to compare.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also as women, you're not really taught to ask for help or if you ask, you look like a damsel in distress. Which is actually something that I've also struggled with, where I was if sometimes when I try to ask for help on one specific thing, I get a little bit of mansplaining, and I'm like, no, I understand. I legitimately need help in one. I need a answer. There's a reason I need this answer. It's not that I don't know anything.
What does womanhood mean to you?
Womanhood means a lot of different things to me. I think womanhood is a lot of balance. Especially as an entrepreneur, it is balancing your work, it is balancing your company, it's balancing a social life, and it's a lot of balancing your body. Whereas men entrepreneurs also still have to take care of their bodies. A lot of stress in a woman's body, if you want to have your own kids, it's deters you in the future, right? So it's a little bit more of making sure that balance is always 100% there, and making sure that you are supported by people who reinforce your you, your main you of who you want to be, how you want to build something, or just champion you. I think something that's also difficult with womanhood is often it also comes with people not wanting to help. There's little bit of cattiness with it, or people being threatened. I think something I really struggle with is I'm often I'd rather work with people if someone has a similar idea, let's join forces, let's try to do something together, because it's hard. I don't have an individual interest of like, this is my own specific thing I want to take. I want it to be a joint collective, and if someone else is doing something similar, like how can we progress together? But not a lot of people think that way.
In India, why it feels like you're so championed, whereas here it feels super individual, like it feels very like lonely.
I think maybe a part of it is here there's a lot of newness. It's not that it's not championed per se, but I think people are just still about to start it. There's a lot of new budding entrepreneurs, so everyone is still going through their journey, and we just maybe haven't reached that point of being able to be that open and help each other. I think there are a lot of people who do still want to champion you, but it's not as much of a community growth. Like their community is very supportive. I want to make like two clear distinctions. I think there is a very supportive community, but when it comes to growing as entrepreneurs, maybe all together, everybody feels a bit more isolated rather than people kind of branding together. Especially within the South Asian community, but that also, again, is just, I think, because we haven't had those resources to make it, and a part of this is I'm realizing it even if I talk out loud, but my cousin took me, I remember in India, to like a huge entrepreneur network of like 100 women. In a small city, Bhubaneswar, which is like a second-tier city in India, but there was this huge conglomerate. They like have workshops, they have events, they're like there for each other, and I couldn't tell you a single South Asian entrepreneur networking event in the US. It doesn't exist, right? And maybe that means we should start something, but it is very valuable. I think it's more of we all feel individual, and that's why it's sometimes hard to even get the time to connect with certain founders, because everyone feels like they're alone trying to do a million different things. When you do connect, I think everyone's like, gosh, this is hard, but we don't have the same facilitation to connect.
Everyone feels so separate and
Yeah.
in their own little
Yeah.
world, and like you gotta get what you gotta get done
Yeah.
because only you can do it.
Yeah.
So having that time.
Yeah, I also think social media portrays like a false reality sometimes, and it creates a fear to reach out to someone. So I do have some entrepreneur friends, we're all in the same space, and they'll be like, you are doing so well with this, and I'll say, you're doing so well with this, you, like, and we have an expectation in our heads of like, your business must be here and your business must be here. But when we actually talk to each other, which takes a lot of breaking down to have that conversation, that's when you're like, oh, actually we're both here. Like, it's not as scary as it sometimes portrays. And I think social media just like gives a false impression with that sometimes.
Of like what success looks like.
Yeah.
So all of this is to kind of bring it back to the concept of womanhood, right? Like I wanted to get really deep into like what your mind is telling you, like what your mental health looks like, because it is such an individualized society. And my previous participant was saying like either end of the spectrum is not good, right? Being super individual or being super collectivist. So from what we know historically and what we know today, how has the meaning of being a South Asian woman changed?
I think it's a tough question to answer because I see it consistently changing. Previously, I think there is more competition between us than previously there, but I think you see people making a specific want to change that. It's just that competition has been ingrained in a lot of us since we were kids, right? And so now changing that is being very intentional, but I have seen people trying to make that change. I have seen people come and talk to me and say, like, I want to purchase something to support another female entrepreneur, or like, you know, champion a female entrepreneur. We shouldn't have to compete with each other. And I think what I've also seen is when someone is nice to me and they're established and willing to talk to me, I'm even more happy and elated because I'm a little bit like, oh my God, you actually want to talk? Like, thank you so much for just responding to my email, because I don't expect that, because we've been fueled to this competition. But we are all realizing, I think, that we can help each other a little bit, but that also comes with everyone being secure in themselves and realizing like we're not out to get each other, we're out to champion each other, and we can make each other stronger by doing that. But I think we're on a path to getting there. I don't necessarily think we're like already there.
Yeah, things are definitely getting better.
Yeah.
For sure. But why do you think that even happened? Like, why do you in the past, right, in like previous times, we've had a lot of strong female leaders, like to a point where there wasn't even a distinction between a strong female leader versus a strong male leader. The gender wasn't even a qualification of what kind of leader you were. If you were a leader, you're a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we have that divide now? What can we do about it?
Honestly, I mean, I think the divide was self-created. I think, unfortunately, society got a little bit complicated, and we created a divide that didn't need to happen. And now we're kind of going back and getting that repercussion. The divide is also, I think, a lot more happened more recently than people realize. It wasn't always like that. Like, we think about World War II, right, which was like, what, 60, 70 years ago, and women took over the workforce when men went to fight and like held down the fort and did all these things. But when men came back, that was a little bit overlooked. Like, there was still this period of like, no, women are going to work and doing this or that, but you're kind of expected to go back to normal, quote unquote. And so from there, I think it became a thing of like women constantly going back to prove themselves. And that happened globally to a certain degree. Like, you think even when you go back and look at history, like, so many queens were so powerful, and many people say that the queen was actually the person, like, was behind king's actions and this and that. But you talk about the king, you don't talk about the queen. Even if you look at Cleopatra, Cleopatra was one of the most powerful women ever. But do you talk about her when you say context, or Mark Antony and Julius Caesar? It was more of just history decided to write things a certain way all of a sudden, and we all decided to comply.
It's men versus women, and like, I feel like a lot of things become where a lot of men these days, with everyone saying men need to be more emotional, there's the other side of men that are like, men are becoming, like, for lack of a better word, like, people on social media will be like, men are becoming pussies. Like, why are men becoming so soft? Why are you so soft? Like, that. Do you know Rasa Kaiser? No. He posted a hygiene video, like what he does for hygiene. That shit went viral because on Twitter people were eating him up, being like, what type of man is doing this? Like, well, if your man is doing this, like, you're dating a woman. Like, but then people are like, do you guys not want to date like clean men? Like, this is a normal thing to do. Like, he's brushing his teeth, he's cleaning his tongue, he's putting on deodorant, he's washing his face, he has skincare routine.
They're normal.
Like, these are normal things to do, but because he's listing them out like one by one, it makes you feel like he's doing too much. But that's like things people are doing every single morning.
Okay, but see, the issue is that like, it's just more public about this stuff now. But like, even when you go back to what I was saying about kings and queens, like, they had emotional conversations. You'd think that there wasn't, like, it's always been a partnership. It's just that now everyone is like comfortable to talk about it more openly, so we judge it more. But it's always been like that.
The story of Kunti is so interesting. I'll just get into it really quickly, but Pandu, her husband, was married to her and Madhuri. So Kunti is his first wife, Madhuri is his second wife. And Pandu had a curse where, because he shot a arrow at a deer, and the deer was actually a rishi. And so the rishi cursed him, and the two deers were mating. The deer was mating with his wife.
Oh.
Okay, so he shot a rishi.
Kinky times.
He shot a rishi while the two deers were mating, but he was taking the form of a deer.
Okay.
So the rishi was like, you are forbidden to mate ever. You will never be able to have sex with your wives. And so
Or like, if you do, you will literally die.
Or if you do, you will die.
Okay.
And because you took that away from me, in a sense. And so Kunti, backstory, Kunti has this boon. She has this mantra that God gave her. And when she was 10 years old, she like tried out this boon. And she just randomly asked, just to see if it would work, and asked Suryan Bhagavan, and said, give me a child. And down came Karna, right? And so Karna is now her first son. Mm-hmm. She takes this baby, puts him in the river. She's 12 years old, right? Mm-hmm. She's like, what am I gonna do with this baby? Mm-hmm. And so the baby just goes off. Obviously, Karna is Karna. He lives, whatever. So then Pandu is like, oh wait, Kunti has this boon, so I'm gonna be able to procreate still, because Kunti can just ask Bhagavan for children. So so each of the Pandavas are children born out of different gods. And so the Pandavas are now technically not Pandu's
Kids.
children, but
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
right? So then Madhuri sexually tempts Pandu, and then he gets enticed, he has sex with her, and then they die.
Both die?
He dies.
Okay.
But
Not
because
before having Nakul and Sahadev. The
it's a
other
side
two
story.
Pandavas.
Yeah, they still have the. So,
There's like
so
five of
Madhuri
them
has
total, right?
Madhuri has her two kids,
Okay.
Nakul and Sahadev, and then so that's Yudhishthir. Then you got
Bhim.
Bhim, Arjuna, and then the two. So that's
No
five,
particular order.
right? And so then after that, Madhuri, that's when Sati happened, right? So now she goes into the pyre and she burns herself alive in this grief.
Why
of
her
losing-
over?
Because Madhuri's like, I caused Pandu's death.
It was
Got it.
enticing him.
kind of her own. So they make it very clear that it was of her own volition.
Yeah.
And essentially leaving Kunti because like Pandu's dead.
And
So she
and
just jumps
Madhuri-
into that fire because of her personal
Yeah,
like,
because of her
love
own
for him. She
personal.
doesn't want to be apart from him.
Got
Yeah, and Madhuri's like, what are we gonna do, Kunti? Like, how are we gonna raise these kids? And Kunti's like, we're just gonna have to figure it out. We're gonna have to raise these 5 boys. And Madhuri's like, I can't do it. I'm stricken with grief. And then jumps into the fire, leaving. And she's like, Kunti, you're super capable of raising these 5 boys. You're
Bye.
gonna do it. Bye.
Bye.
And then leaves and kills herself in a sense. So now Kunti has to raise these 5 boys. And think about the 5 boys that she raised. Think about how we all look at dharma based on the Pandavas. We like the whole conversation of the Bhagavad Gita only happened because of Arjuna, because Krishna wanted to use Arjuna as a way. Krishna purposely confuses Arjuna so that he can give us the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about strong women who raises people like Pandavas, like at the end of the day though, I'm not trying to like say anything about men versus women, but at the end of we don't hear about Kunti as much.
Mm-hmm.
We
You don't.
hear
She's
about
a
Draupadi.
very small character.
Yeah, and like we're watching the show Dharmakshetra, and at the end of Dharmakshetra,
Pause and stop you right there. We actually hear, like, the thing about the Mahabharata that I think affects there's a lot to it, but I think you hear about Kunti a lot
you do if you study it.
if you study
Like,
it.
say the thing is
Yeah.
like, I'm not talking about like if you don't study it, like
Like the
that-
text
like the-
itself,
the
but rather
actual,
the
like,
societal.
but that societal perception of Mahabharata is a little bit different than maybe if you study it, right? And so like when you hear about like what Kunti had to go through in order to raise these 5 beautiful individuals who contributed so much to that society and held that dharmic rule, it's just insane to me. And like,
But I think that's like what you're saying hits a lot of it on the point, though, is nobody talks about that, right? Because she's a woman, she had kids, it's her assumed responsibility. To the world, she did not do anything that great. That is her assumed responsibility. And that's just like the realm that we have fallen into. Like, her 5 boys did a lot. They also did cause a lot of destruction and this and that, but like they learned from their destruction, they moved on, they're heroes. She just did her responsibility.
I think society is trying to create like you said, like women are now working, right? So now women have the role of working and also taking care of the house. And then men have the role of upholding a house where I'm providing for my family. That's inherently something that people really pressure onto men. Like, I've grown up that way. People are still teaching their sons, like, you need to be the man of the house. You need to protect everyone in your house. Like, I have a younger sister. Everyone always says you have to protect her. That's your sister, and you have to protect her, right? And then, so there's that divide where, like, how do you manage everything all at once? And then it's like, but then people are like, oh, so now that women are working, men should be doing what women are doing, and then women should be doing what men are doing. And then it feels like, in some ways, like in very extreme situations, like when women become too masculine and men become too feminine, like it also affects how kids are raised. Because even if you look at like, there's statistics where like a boy who doesn't have a father figure in his life, like even if they don't have to have a father, they just have to have a father figure. If they're only raised around women and they don't have like the guidance of a man, a lot of times they grow up and they become criminals. They'll be more emotional in a sense. Like there's two sides where like you haven't grown up with like a father figure, right? So then you are more like reckless. Like boys are reckless as kids. Like that's a known thing. Boys are gonna be boys. It comes from something, right? So like at certain ages, boys are very, very reckless. They're just like all jumping around everywhere. They have way more energy than little girls. And little girls are more calm. They tend to be calm. They're like around their mom a lot. They're like hanging out with people, like more social. So then those boys who haven't had guidance from a man end up becoming criminals, which is very bad. But then there's the other side where a lot of boys who grew up around more women know how to be more emotional.
Yeah.
So like if a boy grows up around too many men, they don't know how to be in tune with their emotions. But if they don't grow up around any men at all, they just don't know how to like behave in a society.
You're gonna hate my answer, but it's our karma.
Yeah.
It's literally like what's destined for us to go through at this moment. And like this off balance is something that we have to address within us, right? Like if I'm sitting here, like right now I feel like I'm more of my masculine energy because I want to get my shit done. But then what I try to do to balance both of my masculine and my feminine is I tell myself, okay, this is your schedule. And then this is what you have to do on this time, and this is how so that's like my masculine energy because I'm like, okay, business. So that right now I'm flowing. So that right now I can be who I truly am, which is both. I'm both my masculine and my feminine energy, and it's well balanced because I've allowed for my life to be that way. And I've also chosen a partner who allows me to be that way and who hopefully feels like I've allowed him that way, right? Like whenever he's upset or he has emotional, anything, I'm not like, what? Why are you crying? And obviously none of us like in a sane mind think like that. But you're right. Like I think a huge reason why he is the man he is because he has that older sister and he has that strong female presence in his life. But I think he has an older brother, and I feel that he's also similar to that. He has a large emotional capacity, even if he doesn't necessarily show it in the same way that Kiran does. I do think that there is that large emotional capacity that I think all the men in this room have.
Well,
and
I also think it goes into balance. Like
it's all about balance.
Yeah, I think.
What is womanhood?
But it goes both ways, right? It's not just womanhood. It's like it's for men and women in terms of like everybody needs a balance, which is like it's almost like men, women, whatever. Like each party is threatened by the other to a certain degree, and that's where it's like we're getting this imbalance, and it creates more problems. But like, it's okay admitting you need a balance of everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point of this issue, is to show you like all of the different people that have all the different women who have been successful, I feel, are the most balanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like when I say successful, I mean like our legacy. Like I'm talking about the heroes of the past. They're the most balanced, and it's like when you bring that energy into that room, like you automatically trust them so much more because you know that they like themselves, right? And that balance brings that sense of security. That balance allows other people to display their emotions to you. Like I ask these questions to people I've never met in my life, and they always give me an answer. Why is that?
Because you provide
because
a sense of
it's
security.
literally because I hope I encourage the conversation of love first, right? Because like I'm not gonna ever, like I've had men in my issues, I've had women in my issues, I've had all different types of people, all different walks of life, because the point is that we're all the same, but we're not taught that way, and that's our karma.
It's like really interesting to think about this kind of stuff when you go back to some of the stories like the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and all of that stuff. Because if you look at those characters, none of them, although on the surface you might see, oh yeah, he's the warrior and she's the wife. It never usually fits into those roles. Like, take an example like the Mahabharata. The Pandavas are these like demigod warriors on the surface, right? But the most defining characteristics about them are their insane capacity for love for their family, even the part of their family that viciously wants to murder them.
Duryodhana.
Yeah, as well as like a lot of typical masculine qualities and not even, but things that happen to the Pandavas and things they do usually fly against what we consider to be masculine traits. Like 5 dudes sharing one wife and still being seen as these very masculine but also emotionally conscious people. Like I can't name one other tale, one other story, one other epic that could feature a male character
When
like
do-
that, let alone 5.
When does one woman have 5 husbands?
Never.
Ever.
Yeah.
Never.
Like,
Not
look at
in-
Indian
not in
culture. Would
any-
that fly today?
No.
But the heroes of our
But I
of
think
our
that's
history.
yeah, but that's
embody
kind
that.
of one. Like that's a conflict, right? A lot of it is an interpretation. So like we know these stories, we've grown up in these stories, whether it was just like the tale of, you know, Krishna or the Mahabharata or whatever through cartoon books, but like you grow up knowing these stories, but you still, or multiple people still grow up with this argument against it. And what I was going to say before about the Kali Yuga as well is like, personally for me, I have grown up always knowing that in the Mahabharata there was during Krishna's time, there was a Kali Yuga shift and we became into the Kali Yuga of more like greed. There's a story of the farmer and the landowner, right? But we know this, or multiple people know this. But if we know this, then like there's no, like just because you know that the Kali Yuga has changed doesn't mean that you have to subscribe to it. And I think
100%.
that's the biggest issue is like they say knowledge is power, right? But it's not just knowledge is power. If you use the knowledge to act, that's power.
You know what's crazy? The point that you just made in the story of the Mahabharata, there's a point where all of the Pandavas except Yudhishthira are dead because they drank from this water that was protected by this spirit, this yaksha. And Yudhishthira has to answer, I think, like 123 questions that this spirit yaksha asks him in order to revive his brothers. And he's the son of Yamaraj, so his whole thing is justice, truth, honesty, all of that. And what he says to the question, what makes someone who pursues Vedic knowledge divine? And he goes, it's not by birth that one becomes a Brahmin. It's not by how they're educated or raised. It's not even by their study or how much they know. It is their behavior, their conduct, that makes somebody divine. And that's essentially what you're saying right now too. It's not about what you know or what you recognize. It is about how you act more than any of that.
No, I think a lot of what I personally feel is things have always just gotten out of context. Like even if you look, like you're saying, you know, you're not necessarily born into Brahmin, this, that, it's how you act. If you look at the caste system is just people saying, you're experts. Why are you an expert? You had the family knowledge of it. But is that not the same thing we say in corporate America? Exact same thing of like, you are an expert in this. I am 25 and I feel like I cannot leave my career path because I have been like branded as one thing. It's the exact same thing. We just don't, we have not interpreted it in like any other way. But someone who is born in one caste and wants to be significantly more religious can achieve that. It's just like, it was specialization. It wasn't strict like, but yeah.
It was very fluid.
It was very fluid. I mean, that's also true. But then even in that case, you kind of look at it and it's something where India being such a rich country that had so much knowledge, has been conquered so many times, we still fell flat and allowed ourselves to be conquered again and again and again and again without like using the knowledge and the power to fight back. And then now you have a lot of this like colonization that we're still technically fighting through, but at a certain degree, like people accepted it and like allowed it to champion. People turned against each other. That's why India was colonized. Like,
we were never one country until we got colonized, right?
Yeah.
But think about it from the perspective of, we talk about karma and how over time, like different things balance out our karma over time. Whether it's suffering, it gives way for you to be able to experience better things. If you look at India, its biggest, it was 40, if you counted India as one country prior to colonization, $45 trillion GDP, 27% of the world, Earth's wealth was in India, right? It was the most successful landmass of all time at a certain point. And the one thing we didn't have, the reason we kept getting conquered is because we weren't one country. And now, within 70 years, we got to the moon.
Well, okay, but I guess my question to you is that while that is 100% true, then why do we feel that segregation almost more and more? and this is also like off the cuff, I know, but I think I lived in India. I've never felt so distinguished until I actually came specifically to the East Coast for college. I had such a crisis identity when I came to the East Coast for college because I lived in India. I did not want to move back from India. Being Indian is very close to my heart. And I was characterized as someone who was not very Indian in college because I did not have an Indian major, because I just wasn't also from like a place that a lot of people know of. So it's the segregation like comes to you. And I think even something I've noticed is like in India, quite frequently people will speak in English, Hindi, sometimes other things too. But when you know people don't speak the same language, it's a quite fluid conversation. I have been in so many rooms in the US where it's like, I feel uncomfortable because nobody wants to speak in the language that I can understand or speak in. Like a week ago, I was in that situation. I'm 25 in New York City.
I can resonate with what you're saying because I've been in rooms like that too.
Yeah.
100%. And I think part of that is because there's a lot of ways you can take it. I tend to look at things very spatially when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? Like, so in my head, my answer is like, we're still evolving as people and as souls, right? Like, this is part of the journey that is supposed to happen to us.
We're only in
too.
the first part of the Kali Yuga.
Yeah,
There's
like
4.
we're really early in this process, which on one hand is like, it gets a lot worse from here.
It gets a lot worse from here. There's a point where the Ganga River will like the
will
moment
dry
where
up.
Kalki will
And
come
it's not
is
looking
when all
good
the
right
3
now.
rivers dry up. You
Yeah.
know? And
Oh, I
so
didn't know
that's
that.
the moment that he's gonna come. And the moment he's gonna come is when basically we have no land and sky. So we have a long
talking
way to
about
go.
when Vishnu technically comes down in the next avatar.
Yes.
Kalki is the 10th avatar. So he's the Savadaram is
The 10th known one,
he's the
right?
10th known avatar. There's technically like 24 avatars because Buddha is counted as one.
Right, yeah.
And so there's 24. But if you read the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, that comes after the Mahabharata, like during the Kali Yuga time. But yeah, we have like 435,000 years until the sun blows up and when Kalki comes. So we're basically doomed. But in saying that, we have, like you said, we have this knowledge. How can we make sure that we don't become complacent? What can we all do in our individual lives to make that happen?
I think that's when it comes to challenge yourself, right? Like there's a lot of people who say, I know this knowledge, but this is just the way that it is. But it's like, it does not have to be the way that it is. It comes with also being uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. We are so complacent and ready to be comfortable with the uncomfortable where it's like, no, let's push it. Because if you push it, you can change it. I think it's a mental shift.
You have to be like, okay, well, I don't accept this.
Yeah.
I don't accept this
Yeah.
divide. Like what Sahil was saying before, like if we're going to continue to accept the bullshit that we're seeing with the way that men are being portrayed and the way that women are being portrayed, are we actually going to be able to make a change? Right? And so my final question to you, and I'm going to say this to trigger, but, and I'm going to change the question a little bit too. The perfect woman and the perfect man, what does that mean? How has that changed over time?
I don't think that there's a perfect woman and a perfect man. I think that it depends per individual, per partnership, per situation. I think that people are meant to balance each other out, and that you're meant, like a part of that beauty in life is you're meant to find that balance with someone, but there is no cookie cutter answer. Because if there was one perfect woman and one perfect man, then we wouldn't need other men and other women. Like, one woman is sometimes supposed to balance out another woman in different ways. There's supposed to be 2 men that balance each other out. There's supposed to be a woman and a man that balance each other out that have no romantic connection at all. It's just, it is a community balance, a societal balance, not one for one.
Woo!
Yay!
That was amazing! Completely unscripted. Good job with the
Friend,
pan.
you are very
Yeah,
wise.
try it.
Me?
I wish I could get you in it too,
Very
No,
but
that's
outspoken.
okay.
I would have to change the tilt. Yeah, I
I
got
was
to
like
him at
sitting there
times.
staring at my laptop very
No,
angrily.
this is good.
Alright guys, that's a wrap on day 1.
Almost.
We still have to shoot.
Thanks for joining us. Rhea. Kieran, why don't you send us home, man?
So everyone, we've come to the critical point of our juncture. We have wrapped up the interviews for the second documentary and second issue of 2023. With our visionary leader guiding us and giving us the motivation and ideas, as well as the skilled, members of the team, and me saying funny things occasionally, and of course our very wise, well-spoken, eloquent participants, who are all doing amazing things. It takes all of these legends to make this epic that is the Indian Standard. And, we could have asked for a better audience, a better viewership. I don't know how I've become the de facto spokesperson.
You're doing well.
But hey, my wife said I'm doing well, so, I'll just keep going with it. But, we've concluded interviews. We still have some photo shoots to do, but I think at this point in our journey, we just want to say thank you for joining us here. Thank you for listening to us talk and put all these sets together. And we hope you really enjoyed this issue of The Indian Standard, Autumnal Equinox.